Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at some of the highlights of my recent drive through Berkeley, California with the full self-driving beta, which is version 9.2. We're going to start off in the parking lot you saw in my last video, and hopefully I can point out some things I think a few of you may have missed. First off, even before engaging autopilot, you can see as I entered the destination for the car, it wanted me to turn left back there instead of going straight. I did try to give it a moment to recalculate a new path, but ended up just engaging anyways. You can actually see the moment when the path planner loses its direction and has to recalculate, and the car actually leaves the path planner behind. And then something pretty interesting happens, I think. We pull over to the right-hand side and come to a complete stop until the new route is in. This was amazing and a great example of failing gracefully. That was much better than the takeover immediately I had when this happened on my previous video, so awesome. Now, a lot of you gave autopilot a hard time in the comment section of my last video, saying it should have passed right now, but did you notice the car on the left-hand side who's ever so slowly backing out of his parking space? Between the car backing out, the Model 3 in front of us who is not pulled off very far to the right, and the potential car who's going to be pulling out in front of him, I am super glad autopilot decided to stay put until everything becomes a little less chaotic. And speaking of chaos, I first thought this was an evil attempt to steal a parking spot, but it ended up just being someone in a bit of a hurry. I think parking lots are probably going to be some of the tougher places for full self-driving cars, just because all sense of like rules and all that kind of just go out the window. All right, finally some progress. We are moving in a forward direction. This time it does decide to pass the van on the left, which I think was a good call, and gets back onto the right-hand side of the road for the poorly marked stop sign. And now we have some pedestrians approaching ahead, which autopilot clearly sees, and surprisingly it decides to take the right-of-way here, which was fine and safe, but a little surprising to be honest. Generally, I feel like it's a bit overly cautious with pedestrians around, but maybe it got a little impatient with the last situation it just had to deal with. So far though, I must say I'm pretty impressed at how the beta is doing in this parking lot, especially with the speed control. It used to just try to get to the speed you set immediately, but with more recent versions it seems to be able to modulate the speed more appropriately for the situations, at least most of the time. And one final left to get out of here, and if you notice on the visualizations, for some reason it starts thinking the cars in front of us are using their brakes, which I think may have thrown it off a bit and caused it to be extra slow here. Or perhaps it was the lack of visibility from the right-hand side, not sure. While I fast forward through this drive, before we get into some of the more interesting clips, I'm hoping to get some feedback from you guys about my most recent videos and about what I'm about to say. There seemed to be some pretty split feedback in the comment sections of my videos without commentary. Some seemed to really enjoy them, and others didn't like them because there was only raw audio and no voiceover. But to completely honest with you guys, I really dislike the sound of my own voice, and the videos I post where I let the car do the talking by itself, ASMR style, are the most enjoyable to make for me, and it's the kind of content I personally like to see. I would also love to upload videos more frequently, and raw videos like that are the way to make it happen. So please let me know in the comments section if uploading more often is better even when there's no commentary, or if you'd rather I put content like that somewhere else, like Twitter or something. Alright, I know a lot of you guys always want to see some roundabout testing, so here we go. Except, unlike all roundabouts all over the world, in most of California they also have stop signs tacked on. What's the point of this, you ask? Well, there's a very good reason for it, and I will tell you now. Autopilot does display a message that it's creeping forward for visibility, but seems pretty stuck in fear of all this movement ahead. It does start slowly creeping forward when there are some gaps in traffic, some of which are probably big enough to fit into and take the right-of-way, to be honest, but does seem to be trying to play this really safe. This is a pretty busy roundabout, so autopilot's probably not going to get too lucky with like a giant gap in traffic here. A fairly large gap does appear though, and Autopilot decides to go for it, but quickly changes its mind when it sees the car approaching from the left. And now we play the waiting game one more time, with quite a few cars coming from the left all at once, none of which are actually stopping at their stop signs. Steering wheel also turning right for some reason. One car actually does stop, which Autopilot sees and reacts to right away. Not quite fast enough for the truck behind us though, as you may have heard. I'd say roundabouts feel pretty robotic still, and they could definitely use some work. It's funny, in some places Autopilot I feel is too assertive, and other times like this I feel like it's not assertive enough. Hopefully there's some improvements to this in the next update, and interestingly enough, Elon mentioned in a tweet recently that they're going straight to version 10 after this release instead of version 9.3, which is supposed to have a completely retrained neural network. He also mentioned the download button for the beta should be going out in the next 4 weeks or so, which is amazing news, but you also have to realize what 4 weeks is in Elon time, which may be a tad more complicated than it seems. I do have a sneaking suspicion that things may end up getting delayed, especially with things like these ridiculous investigations going on into Autopilot, which is just absolutely ridiculous, and don't even get me started on it. Autopilot seemingly getting a little confused about who has the right-of-way at this stop sign. You can see even though we stopped first, the car to our right was highlighted blue, and Autopilot was waiting for him to continue. It did unhighlight the car and looked like it was starting to move, but too late. I actually don't even know what the cars being highlighted in blue even means, to be honest with you. Sometimes I feel like it's pretty random. I feel like I've had it yield to vehicles that weren't highlighted, and also not yield for the ones in blue, so not really sure. Coming up to this stop sign, we have extremely poor visibility of incoming traffic from both the left and right sides. I feel like with intersections like these, it really wouldn't even matter if you had side-looking cameras mounted in like the very front of the car, it still wouldn't be able to see anything. I feel like it's more about the car's behavior in intersections like this, just like a human driving. And although Autopilot did take its time to continue and complete this maneuver, I think it handled it beautifully. I honestly think it's difficult to get through the AI presentation with the impression that the current hardware isn't capable of being way safer than a human. This turn is sponsored by Ford Blue Cruise. That was a joke, obviously. If you haven't watched videos on how Blue Cruise actually performs, I would definitely encourage you to do so. I did have some slowdowns like this throughout my testing, where it takes Autopilot a moment to figure out if the car ahead is just parked or actually like stopped in the road, which does need to be treated a little bit differently. Coming up is the end of our nav route, and because there was a car behind me, I manually pulled off to the side of the road. And this is actually where my raw, narrow Berkeley Drive video began. I would like to show you a few more highlights from this drive. There were some pretty crazy cases that Autopilot had to deal with, and overall, I am pretty impressed at the speed control and its ability to navigate through environments like this pretty confidently. I mean, these are pretty complex streets with pretty odd things going on, and Autopilot, kind of was doing exactly what I would have in a lot of these situations. Sometimes it does seem to act a little bit too cautiously. You can see this gentleman who's a little confused about why I'm not just passing him, but I'd much prefer this over speeding around all these blind corners. During AI Day, we were shown that Autopilot is starting to have an understanding of what could be around the corner, which is exactly how humans drive this kind of environment, and it's really insane when you think about it. And you thought you've seen some pretty narrow streets and scenarios so far in Berkeley? Well, they're pretty small potatoes compared to what's ahead here. See how even when Autopilot realizes it can fit through some of these gaps, it still understands it should go extremely slow, which is appreciated. And now you see Autopilot actually fold the mirrors on its own to reduce our size as much as physically possible to fit through some of these narrow corridors. So crazy. I love this. Can't lie, this was an extremely uncomfortable situation for me. The steering wheel got twitchy there for a moment, and I made sure to hold on extra tight just in case it got any closer to the BMW off to the right. It barely made it, but it did it on its own. Another close quarter scenario up ahead here, where we have a Model 3 stopped off to the left-hand side of the road and a woman walking her dog on the right. Autopilot chose the safest decision, I think, in this scenario, which was to slow down to almost a complete stop until it has an understanding, and then continues cautiously. Unfortunately, doesn't do quite as well at planning a path ahead, which does cause it to slam on the brakes and tells me to take over immediately. Things like this are expected, as we still are in beta. But the cool thing is, a disengagement like that will potentially be put into the Tesla simulator, which was shown off during AI Day, where they can basically repeat that same scenario in an infinite amount of different ways to figure out a way to improve the car's behavior next time. This really is what nobody else has, which is real-world driving data. And I think that's perhaps the craziest part, which is that the beta is just going to keep getting better and better and better at this stuff with every single software update. And the neural networks that all drive the car together are just going to keep getting more and more and more intelligent. Wanted to slow this part down to show the extreme caution Autopilot takes for pedestrians who may be hiding behind bushes. It seems that safety is a top priority when there are any kind of pedestrians in the scene in these close quarters, as you've probably noticed from some of my other clips. The NHTSA investigation into Autopilot is literally just prolonging the development of this software, which is going to save an unfathomable amount of lives. It's shameful, and I think the entire world has gone mad at this point. I'd like to make a video deep diving this subject a bit more, although I think others have already made some pretty great videos about it. There is some really shady stuff going on with the people who are supposed to have our best interests in mind, and I encourage you to do your own research about this subject and other investigations and just follow the money. Think about what Tesla's success looks like for other brands. What you're seeing the car do right now is out of reach of everybody. Everybody else needs LiDAR mapping where the car is driving through a predefined simulation that can't change, while Autopilot is just looking ahead and creating a simulation of the environment on the fly. It is not even close to comparable. Stifling progress is the only way these other manufacturers will have a chance of catching up, and it's honestly becoming pretty apparent who's in bed with who the longer this plays out. And a wild car appears ahead. Sorry, I got a bit heated back there. Autopilot has no room to go to the right because of the bushes and waits for this car to give us just slightly more room before squeezing through. Gonna go ahead and let the rest of this clip play out because our final destination is fairly close. If you haven't liked the video yet, please do so. It really goes a long way to get these videos to new audiences and also helps my channel out really a lot. Also, if you'd like to see any particular scenarios or know of any interesting or extra difficult intersections around the Bay Area, please leave a comment and I will do my best to get to them. Thank you so much for watching. You guys are honestly the best, and thank you so much again. I can't say thank you enough. Bye.